G'day again everyone, welcome back to the vlog. Today is my first poker session of 2020 and it's also the first session of my Aussie Millions 2020 challenge. I'm playing 150 hours of cash game poker during January as well. I'm playing in the main event of the Aussie Millions. It's coming up about halfway through the month, but I've got to get cash game sessions in before then to try and fill out this 150 hour goal. So without any further ado, let's get straight into it. Alright, so we are wrapping up the first session of the year, as well as the first session of the Aussie Millions 2020 challenge. I ended up playing for about 8 hours, so it's actually pretty early in the morning here in Melbourne, and as you guys would expect, I'm pretty damn tired right now, so I'm going to go home and rest. We'll get the hand histories out to you guys later. G'day again there everyone. A lot of keen-eye viewers will notice exactly where I am. I'm back at the Lumiere Bar in Crown Casino, about a day, a bit less than 24 hours removed from the 2-5 session I played last night, first night of the Aussie Millions 2020 challenge, and played a few interesting hands, so let's start to get into them right now. Alright, so first hand I'm in the low jack with King Jack of clubs. I go ahead and make it 15, then I get a call from a tight aggressive button player, and the big blind is more passive and he calls. So we go 3 ways to a flop, 9, 8, 5 rainbow. The big blind checks to me with a backdoor straight draws and backdoor flush draw here. I actually think this is a pretty good spot to start c-bet bluffing. There's going to be a lot of good turns for us if we do get action. So I go ahead and bet 25, and the tight aggressive player on the button calls and the big blind folds. So I'm heads up with a button to a turn, which is the 4 of clubs. Obviously a pretty good turn card. Do make the flush draw here. So I think it's a good spot to barrel. Not only did we pick up more equity, but if my opponent does have a hand like 9-10, 9-8, it's going to put, well, probably not 9-8, that's 2 pair. But if he does have a ace-9, something like that, a second barrel is going to put him in a pretty tricky spot. It's got to be somewhat concerned I have an overpair. So I go ahead and bet 50, and then the button calls. Not exactly what I wanted. And the river is the 7 of diamonds. Also not exactly what I wanted. There is now a 4-liner to a 6 out on the board, and I have the decision, do I want to continue bluffing here, or do I just want to check and give up? And I actually think this is a really good spot to just check and give up. I think if I continue to barrel, it's going to be kind of obvious I'm bluffing, because on the turn I was representing an overpair, right? And if I did have like pocket aces here, would I really bet this river card for value when my opponent could definitely, it'd be so easy for them to have a straight or 2 pair? I think it's skeptical, so since I can't really represent that hand, I just go ahead and check it. And then my opponent goes ahead and bets 120, so obviously I have a pretty easy fold with king high here, but I don't know if I have the straight or not, but obviously can't look them up with king high either way. Next hand, a passive player limps under the gun. I'm in the hijack with pocket 10s. I go ahead and make it 20. Then I get a call from a passive cutoff, a passive button, as well as the original limper calls. So we go 4 ways to a flop, and it's a banger of a flop. It is Queen 10 6 Rainbow. The action checks to me. Obviously going to bet my middle set for value here. I go ahead and make it 50, and then the cutoff calls and the other two players fold. So we are heads up to a turn, and the turn is the Queen of Hearts. It's a full rainbow on the board now. Obviously we do make a full house, which is great. And the action's on me here, and I think I actually make a pretty significant mistake here. I actually check. My intention of checking was to try and check raise when my opponent bets a queen. I think check raising is an efficient way of inflating the pot with my full house here. But I do think that's a bit of a mistake. I think it makes more sense to bet myself. Obviously, there's a bunch of straight draws on the board, and if my opponent has a queen, they've got to call a bet anyway. So I think I can bet small to get called by a bunch of stuff. Obviously, a queen, maybe a queen would raise even if I bet small. Maybe not against a passive player, but that's up in the air. So I think betting small might be the play, or even over betting just to try and really build the pot against a queen. I think both of those options will be better than checking, but I do make the mistake. I check, and then my opponent checks back. Obviously wasn't in love with that. We go heads up to a river. The river is the king of clubs. I don't really think my opponent has many strong hands here, but I still want to bet in case they do want a hero call with, it's unlikely to have a 10, but pocket 8s, pocket 9s, they might call if I do bet. So I go ahead and make it 80, and then my opponent folds pretty quickly. Okay, next hand, a passive player in the low jack limps. I'm in the hijack with ace jack. I go ahead and make it 20, then a passive player on the button calls, and the original limper actually folds. So I'm heads up to a flop of King 9 5 Rainbow. The action's on me, and I think it's a pretty interesting spot whether to bet or check here. I think it's very likely I have the best hand with ace high, so there's definitely merit to betting it for a bit of protection slash value. I think worse hands can call than ace high. So I go ahead and make it 20, and then the button does call. So we're heads up to a turn, and the turn is the 10 of spades, putting out the backdoor flush draw, obviously giving us a gut shot too. I think this is a good spot to continue barreling. I think if my opponent has a hand worse than a king, he's very likely to fold. He might put me on a hand that's king, queen or better. So I go ahead and bet 60, and then my opponent calls again. So obviously wasn't that excited about that, but the river's the jack of hearts, giving me second pair. I think there's no other play but just to check it over to my opponent and see what they do here. I think betting here would be very value ownage. So I check it over to him, and then he goes in the tank, a good 30 seconds. He actually starts talking. He starts saying like, oh, I thought you had ace king, but you checked twice you bet twice and checked the river. I'm confused. And he checks back pocket 5s. So obviously we're going to lose that one with ace jack there. And I'll be honest, I'm pretty grateful that my opponent didn't bet the river because it put me in a bit of a sick spot. In this next hand, the same least aggressive player limps under the gun. I'm in the +2 position with king 10 of spades. I raise it up to 20, and the action gets back to the limper, and he calls. So we go heads up to a flop of queen 7 6 with 2 clubs and 1 spade. So obviously we whiff pretty significantly here, but we do have backdoor straight draws and backdoor flush draws. So when the under the gun player checks to us, I think this is a good spot to start mixing in a bluff. So I go ahead and bet 30, and then the under the gun player calls. So we go to a turn. The turn's a good one for me. It is the jack of diamonds. The under the gun player checks to me, and obviously I'm open-ended here, pick up extra equity, so I actually go ahead and mix in the bluff. I go ahead and bet 70, and then the action's back on my opponent, and they think about it for a bit. They ask how much I have, and then they decide to raise to 225. I only started the hand with about 600, so obviously not getting good implied odds to call this raise, so I just fold my straight draw there. Alright, last significant hand for the session. I'm under the gun with my favourite hand in all of poker, pocket aces. I go ahead and make it 15, and then the small blind, who is actually the same least aggressive opponent from the previous 2 hands, he goes ahead and calls. So we are heads up to a flop of 952 Rainbow. Small blind checks it over to me. Obviously going to bet my aces here. I go ahead and make it 10. And then the small blind actually check raises to 25. Obviously going to call here with my aces. I think re-raising would be a bit of an overplay, but can't fold them. That'd be way too conservative. So I call, and then we see a turn, which is the 3 of diamonds. The small blind continues to bet. He goes ahead and makes a 40. Obviously I'm somewhat concerned my opponent could have flopped a set on the flop, but Obviously not going to fold pocket aces for 40 here. I throw in the call, and then we do see a river. The river's an interesting one. It's the four of spades, which actually gives us a straight. We have the dog end of the wheel straight. And then my opponent thinks about it for a bit, and he actually continues to bet. He goes ahead and makes it 85. The action's on me, and I have a pretty interesting spot, whether I want to raise for thin value or just call. I think against a loose aggressive opponent, I thought for the previous two streets it was pretty likely he's bluffing, and some of his bluffs might contain a 6 just by happenstance. It's definitely possible that I'm not ahead here, but if my opponent did have the set that I was somewhat concerned about, I think I might call a re-raise here, because they probably won't put me on an ace unless it specifically is pocket aces, so it might look like a bit of a bluff if I do raise here. So I'm going for the thin value. I go ahead and raise 200. By the way, I'm raising small to give my opponent a good price to call. I make it 200, then my opponent tanks for probably about 30 seconds before sighing, throwing in the call. I show my pocket aces and he mucks. So obviously happy to take down that hand. My opponent later claims that he did flop a set, so if that's true, we definitely ran good to go runner on a straight. So that wraps up the session. Those were the most interesting hands I played. Like I said, I played for 8 hours, definitely had a few card dead stretches throughout the session, but happy to get 8 hours in towards our goal of 150 hours of cash for January. I ended up buying in for 700 and cashing out for 706, so definitely happy that I didn't have a loss, but obviously a very, very crap hourly considering I played 8 hours. In terms of my gameplay grade for this session, I'm going to give myself a B+. I think I was pretty close to that A-level play, and I'm particularly proud I did play that well considering it was an 8-hour session. I've talked about on the vlog before how I don't really play as well when the sessions do go that long, but can't go to that A-grade level. I did make a few mistakes, not continuing to bet my full house with a pocket tens hand on the turn. I think I lost a lot of value there, and my win would have been a lot bigger than $6 if I did so. But I played pretty disciplined for those card dead stretches, and I still mixed in my some bluffs when I did have the tight table image. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how I played, but still not that A-grade level when I do make some pretty silly mistakes at the table still. So that's going to wrap up the vlog for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching as always. Stay subscribed. All of January we've got the Aussie Millions Challenge as well. I will be playing the main event, so subscribe to my channel and you'll get all that. For now, from Lumiere Bar in Crown Casino, I'm out of here. Peace.